Well, as you know, Sri Kumar, our mutual friend, sort of broached the idea to begin with, and it was wonderful. I thought it was an amazing opportunity to write about this community for the very simple reason that this is the community I grew up with. I come from such a mixed background. I have a great grandmother who's French and Malayali blood and Tamilian blood and Maharashtrian blood. So in India, I've really never fitted into any sort of particular community, and the only community that's accepted me quite completely has been the Anglo-Indian community. I went to an Anglo-Indian school, my final years at school. When I was in my sixth grade, I had a class teacher, Michael Enos, who was my class teacher in Anglo-Indian. And right through sort of the course of my life, I've had Anglo-Indians come my way, almost like angels, to sort of guide me and shape me and inform who I became as a person. So having had this access to this community the way I did, having been inside their homes, having had best friends who were Anglo-Indians, people I sang with and went to dances with and learned to jive with, I got a real keen sense of who they were as a people. And this book is just an amalgamation of all those experiences, of all the things that happened to them and sort of that I watched personally. A lot of this is from real life. I mean, some of the stories are true stories, uh, and seems to sort of, I've tried to portray the human condition of the Anglo-Indians particularly. And I hope I've been able to bring that out with the book. And thank you, Harry. It's been such an amazing opportunity. Yes, very much so. So I've already mentioned Michael Enos. Michael Enos was my class teacher in my sixth standard, and he used to call me a scalawag. he was he spoke the most beautiful English. He was a gifted musician, but what was absolutely wonderful about this man was he left every one of his students feeling like they were teacher's pet. And I think that's such a fabulous legacy to leave a student. If you go through life thinking that one adult, especially a teacher, someone who's in a position of power, thinks that you're the most special thing there is in the classroom, it gives you a certain confidence about yourself. It gives you a certain, verve to get through with life. And Michael did that for us. He was our crafts teacher, he was our geography teacher, and most of us who studied with him stayed in touch with him right through. I remember going back once after I'd left school in university, and I went to visit him, and he and another classmate of mine, we ended up playing Scrabble with him the whole day, and of course he beat us hollow. But he was just such a kind gentleman. About 3 years ago, he passed away a year and a half ago, and about a year before that, he came personally to invite me for the dingo dance. And I remember I went to it, and it was so much fun. I got to see him perform with his band. We sat and chatted about all kinds of things. We caught up with his life. And he had this fabulous way back then, even though I was a grown up. He made me feel like I was a 12-year-old again. He has this innocence to him that brought out the innocence back in me. And I miss him terribly. It was a sad day when he died. And to me, he was very representative of the Anglo-Indian community again, because he was kind, he was gentle, he was fun to be around, he was a great cook, he had a great sense of humor, he was well read. So, well, that was Michael. Loretta Lamborn was my classmate through my final 2 years in college at this Anglo-Indian school, mountain home that I went to, which also had an Anglo-Indian principal, Max Fletcher. And Loretta had possibly the finest voice I've ever heard in another human being. She could sing like an angel. Little children would stop, and fall silent when she began. But more than her voice and her talent, she was such a nice person. I used to get bullied a lot in school, and she would always notice. And then, at lunch break, we would go around behind the chemistry lab, and she would sit and talk to me and tell me not to worry and just sort of, comfort me and cheer me up. She would bring me water to school every day because I would forget. She passed away 20 years ago, and I miss her every day. I don't think there'll ever be another friend or another human being like her. In the days that there was no Facebook to remind us that, oh, it's somebody's birthday, wish them, this girl remembered my birthday every year, even though I was living in Bangalore at the time. And I would come home on occasion, and I would find this little gift waiting for me, saying, "Happy birthday, Sangeetha, I love you." And that was just her. And again, representative of the Anglo-Indian community. Wonderful people, giving people, gentleness, incredible talent. that often goes unrecognized. So yeah, the book is dedicated to both of them because both of them are long gone, and I thought it would be a wonderful way to honor two of the most incredible Anglo-Indians I have met, other than you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I think writing a novel requires one plot that really plays out with a multitude of characters that come in. And as you know, we had a short amount of time to produce this book in. I didn't want to do just an ordinary book of short stories because that's been done to death. And I sort of thought, well, how do I do this differently? How do we sort of get people guessing from one story to the next? So I would introduce a secondary character in each story and then build on their life in the next one. Given that I grew up in the small town of Kuno, where I know a lot of Anglo-Indians and a lot of people, I've seen how often in a small town lives are constantly interwoven, interconnected, they blend seamlessly in and out of each other, and I thought, why not bring that element into this book and just do a book of short stories that is different. So it's, I suppose, a novel of short stories.
Yeah.
I used to steal my brother's books when I was a 7-year-old girl and read them, because back in the day in the 1980s in Delhi, books were not easy to come by. And my brother had access to more because he used to get pocket money because he was older. So I began reading his Hardy Boys and his Commando comics. And then at the age of 12, I read The Hobbit. The first book I ever read was The Enchanted Wood by Enid Blyton. And I think I love fiction. I mean, at the end of the day, all our lives are stories. There isn't a single person alive here who doesn't have a story to tell. And to be able to translate that onto paper, to get other people to read it, to talk about lives, to fictionalize people's experiences, I think it's such a privilege. And yes, I absolutely love fiction. I think fiction is what makes the world go around, really. Where would we be as a human species without our stories? And yeah, so this is what I've chosen to do now. I think it is possibly the secret desire of every writer to see their words translated onto the silver screen in some shape or form. To watch your words come alive through actors, through all the incredible different facets that film can bring to a story that possibly, books can't or words can't, would be an amazing experience. Of course, I would have to learn a lot about business, and I would have to sort of learn from the beginning and start from scratch. But yes, I would absolutely love to do this. I think it would be an amazing thing to see some of this work translate into film or television, because here's the thing, reading seems to be dropping off. Not everybody reads, and people now especially are more comfortable sort of watching television. It's become a way of life, and to have these stories reach a much wider audience, well, that would be a dream come true. I've been writing forever. I mean, I grew up in this small town in Chennai. Well, Chennai is a small town, I suppose, at the end of the day. And it was a very lonely childhood, and there was no television or radio or books or even friends. So I began writing because there was just nothing else to do. And it sort of translated very well into a career because I began my life with hotels, and I began to do PR and communications for them. And one of the joys of working with hotels is you have to create stories to sell to your guests. You have to do it in a corporate way, of course, but when you create food festivals, you're talking about your rooms, you're talking about the experience of the hotels, you are creating stories that people have to buy into. I did a brief stint in advertising as well, which didn't work out very well because it was too, sort of
compartmentalized.
Very much so. You're kind of doing what the client wants rather than what feels right. So that didn't last very long. And then I eventually moved to Jordan, where I didn't have a whole lot to do to start with, and I remember calling the Indian embassy in Jordan and asking them, well, could I volunteer with you, because my husband works here and I have nothing to do, can I volunteer my time? And I was told that they don't have any positions for educated people. So off I went, and I happened to see this magazine, and I wrote to them and I said, can I write for you? And they said, well, come in. And they gave me piece to do. They said, can you do a piece on body dysmorphic disorder, something which I believe I have. So I did this piece for them, and they saw it, and they called me the next day, and they said, we love your work, would you mind becoming a contributing editor? And it just came about like that. I took over. And this is where the sort of experience from hotels and working in print and writing really came into use. I took a magazine that was 98 pages and I turned it into a magazine that was 220 pages in 4 months. I had a fantastic team I worked with. The market was very niche. It targeted the English-speaking Arabic women across 7 countries across the Middle East and the Gulf. It had a massive range. At one point, we were even beginning to get syndicated content from various other places around the world. And then I was noticed by, the work that I was doing rather, was noticed by King Hussein's photographer of 26 years, who approached me to do a cultural and tourism magazine for the country. And suddenly here I had this opportunity to create a magazine from scratch. And I did it in 3 months. We went from idea to launch. We had Princess Alia come to our launch. We had all sorts of dignitaries and diplomats. And the magazine itself, I think I have a copy here.
Hold it up for the...
Yeah, this one was, it was called I Magazine.
Yes.
And it was basically an eye on Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
And let me see if I can open some of this up for you, about the advertisements. We just featured a lot of Jordan, its history, its culture, its wildlife, its people. We worked with amazing people, amazing designers, amazing photographers and writers. And we basically showcased Jordan, and the magazine was nominated for an International British Council Award.
Wow.
At that point, of course, I had to leave Jordan and go away. I went off to the UK and I wrote my previous book. And I came back to Jordan 2 years later, and they invited me to do this magazine, which was called The Capital. And The Capital was a bilingual magazine, which was hellish to do, honestly. You're kind of going back to front really in every which way you can think of.
Arabic and English.
It was Arabic and English. I worked with 3 Arabic editors who were cross-referencing each other's works because I didn't speak a word of Arabic or read. And that did really well. We were sponsored by the mayor of Amman. And then that lasted a while, and I then moved to Brussels, where I started this magazine, which was called The Business Innovator. It was a flagship magazine of something called EBM, which was an offshoot of the European Commission. And it was a magazine about entrepreneurship and innovation around Europe. Eventually the mandate increased to cover global issues regarding entrepreneurship around the world, covering best practices. We were very lucky. We got to work with the European Space Agency. We got to meet MEPs. I got to work with the Institute of Gender Equality. I got to work with the most amazing sort of players in the field of innovation across the world. We were talking to leaders, we were talking to ministers. And it was a fabulous insight for me because I came from a lifestyle background into a business background. So I was in a very steep learning curve, but it's an experience I would absolutely, I cherish. It was wonderful. And then I moved to Corfu from Brussels after 6 years there because the weather was simply horrible and the taxes were way too high. And the opportunity came up to do this, which was amazing, and I can't thank you enough. It was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sangeetha. It was lovely talking to you on this show of ours on Pepper Watcher.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
It's great working with you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay.